In recent elections, what would you say is the hallmark of presidential candidates? I'd say they ran to their base, and that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing right now. She's running to the base of her party. She's not appealing to the moderates in any way, but this radicalized fringe that has dominated the party platform for decades now. Trump is running to the middle, and this should concern us all right now, especially since most moderates have no idea this is what he's doing. Just stick with me as we dive into this with some common sense for uncommon times. Welcome to Common Sense for Uncommon Times, where we equip and encourage believers to respond to issues of our day with common sense from a biblical perspective. Okay, so let's think about this. How did President Obama win both of his elections? And how did Trump win his first election? In both scenarios, they excited the base of their party. And when Trump first ran, he had a strong pro-life message, for which many Christians were initially skeptical because of some of the things he'd said before then. But then he did something never done before. He identified constitutionalist judges he planned on nominating for the Supreme Court. Even though some people called them conservative justices, that's not what they are. They were primarily constructionist judges who claimed to stand with the original intent of the Constitution. Now Trump stood for religious freedom, traditional marriage, and he stood with Israel. He emphasized the need that we need to support and defend the Second Amendment and the entirety of the Constitution. President Trump ran to the base of the party, and we enthusiastically got out to vote. Something odd happened in the days leading up to the 2024 GOP convention. Trump asserted that conservative evangelicals didn't get out to vote. Now, I'm not sure who provided him with this intel, but it's contrary to the stats because according to a study that George Barna did following the 2016 election and followed up in 2020, this research showed that conservative evangelicals played a key role in pushing him to victory in 2016. In my opinion, it started when he and Mike Pence showed up in flood-ravaged Louisiana to review this damage that had been done by a massive flood, and then they offered help. This had been completely overlooked by Obama and Hillary. Many skeptical conservatives started saying that this is the first time that he looked presidential. We, conservative Christians, showed up in droves, and President Trump knew full well following the 2016 election that we helped push him over the top. So re-election bids often see a drop in voter turnout for incumbents. But for Trump, it increased by about 11 million votes from 2016 to 2020 because he did what he promised. And conservative evangelicals, they backed him in greater number. Barna's research again showed in 2020 that among SAGECONs, and that's an acronym for Spiritually Active Governance Engaged Conservative Christians, 99% of us turned out to vote. 99% for him. You got to remember the rest of the story, though. With very little public campaigning, President Biden garnered an unprecedented and unbelievable 15.4 million more votes in 2020 than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. And I do mean unbelievable. Trump appeared before huge, excited crowds with tens of thousands of people in appearance. And Biden struggled to fill the gymnasium. And you can't use this excuse that people were being responsible and staying home due to COVID and socially distancing, because leftist mobs filled the streets of major metropolitan cities protesting, rioting, and burning down the infrastructure during the same time. Let's be intellectually honest. Who really believes that Biden got 81.2 million votes compared to Hillary's 65.8 million? As Kamala Harris continues this funny honeymoon phase of her presidential run, she's doing what has historically proven to be successful. She is exciting the base of her party, and she's making this about abortion and the Supreme Court, which are closely related. She's going on the RuPaul drag show or whatever it's called. If this isn't running to your base, then what is? I mean, last I checked, drag queens, they aren't mainstream. Meanwhile, she and the Democrat media machine, aka the conventional media, they're singing in unison that J.D. Vance is weird. And considering the base to which Kamala Harris is pandering, well, that's just weird. With the exception of this push of the leftist agenda to transition children into the opposite sex, President Trump seems to be running towards the middle when it comes to many social issues. He's not appealing to the party's base. At the convention, Trump and leadership talked about inclusivity, broadening the tent, and advancing the idea that abortion is now a states' rights issue. Now, broadening the tent and advancing or inclusivity, that's okay. But when you start advancing the idea that this is a states' rights issue, we've got a problem. Many in President Trump's close circle accept this idea that abortion can be outlawed in Missouri, but commonplace in Illinois or Kansas. Meanwhile, leftists are pushing to secure nationwide access to abortion. When Trump talks about the courts, it's primarily in the past tense. While some of the people at the convention talked about God from the podium, when it came to policymakers, most of them lacked substance. Conservative Christians took note of this. Since the Republican convention, the leftist echo chamber is in full tilt, shouting that Trump is aligned tightly with these radical Christian nationalists, which, by the way, is a term on which none of them can agree in definition. But because the majority on the left only listen to their echo chamber, they believe this to be true, even though Trump is trying hard to distance himself from conservative Christians. The Democrats and their media are advancing the narrative that he wants to take away the rights of women. Every mainstream news source is promoting this message, which serves only to further excite the leftist base against Trump and against their common enemy of Trump. On the right, conservatives who value life, religious liberty, protection for Israel, and the importance of the Second Amendment are starting to feel abandoned by the former president. It's as though President Trump and his close advisors assume that conservative evangelicals will never support far-left Democrats, regardless of what Trump says and does. And they're right. It's true. We won't support Harris. But unenthused voters are uninclined to vote. Getting out the vote requires rousing the base. And Trump is ignoring an important part of his base. Despite the ongoing corruption of Biden and his family, and the failure to keep his story straight, the Democrat machine, including Kamala Harris, gaslighted us for years with this fairy tale that the current president is as sharp as a tack and on top of his game. We vividly saw evidence to the contrary, and we knew someone else was pulling the strings behind the facade of Biden. For some time, poll numbers have hovered at a low number not seen since Jimmy Carter ran for re-election, and what some are suggesting was an intentional and calculated move by the leftist power brokers. Biden's handlers allowed him to debate Trump, and then everyone on the left knew that the gig was up. The media, members of Congress, and the general population of Democrat voters were deflated. With low poll numbers now sinking through the floor, there was this political coup underway. You had Obama and Schumer and Pelosi and the Democrat Party donors and most others working tirelessly behind the scenes because they knew there was no chance of creating a believable charade that Biden could win re-election. Now that they've successfully forced Biden out of the race, the instant unearned media, Kamala Harris is getting through mass media, social media, the search engine results. It's immeasurable. You combine that with the reality that they are concealing her past record, deleting footage of her unattractive idiosyncrasies, and then doing everything to make her look exponentially better than Madison Avenue advertising could do. It completely overshadows President Trump's coverage. On top of all this, she hasn't done a single interview yet. She hasn't spoken off her teleprompter script or engaged in a single debate. Days before the Trump-Biden debate, Kamala Harris was considered toxic by Democrat leaders. Now she's their savior. To call this anything other than a political coup is dishonest. They got rid of the anchor that was sinking their chance to maintain control and replaced him with the person who would draw the least amount of public resistance from their constituency. Days later, they're all back on the same page to villainize the man who they would also inspire an assassin to attempt to eliminate. In this environment, with everything against him, Trump needs to get out the vote all the more. He has got to excite his base. Again, I don't know who fed him this false narrative, but Trump was greatly mistaken when he said conservative evangelical Christians didn't show up to vote for him in 2020. We did. We were with him in greater numbers in 2016. We believed he was the best candidate for the job. He kept his promises, and we supported him. If he continues to ignore this important demographic by relegating our values to an undefined bullet point on a campaign website, or worse yet, ignoring what we value, he's going to make his past false statement a current reality. Trump should remember to promote this. History is important, and our founders overwhelmingly cited the Bible and Christian teaching when founding America. Decades later, this was still commonplace. During the centennial year of the United States, President Ulysses S. Grant wrote a letter to be distributed among the children and youth of America, in which he said, "Hold fast to the Bible as the sheet anchor of your liberties. Write its precepts on your hearts and practice them in your lives." And by the way, a sheet anchor was the extra or emergency anchor of the ship. We must continue teaching each generation our history and the words from our founders, not through commentaries that came decades or centuries later. Life, the next point I want to make is life is the first unalienable right. Protecting life from the cradle to the grave is the abolition movement of our generation. And it shouldn't be relegated to a states' rights issue any more than slavery should have been. The third thing is that families are the bedrock to our national stability. It starts with a mom and a dad, and we did not define the word marriage. God did. He defined it as joining of one man and one woman who commit before God that they will be united for the rest of their lives in a family. When you think you are smart enough to redefine an institution ordained by God, you only pervert its meaning, much like Herod and Herodias did. Within the institution of family, God identified that the mom and dad are responsible for the raising of their children. It's not something to be delegated elsewhere, be it the church, a school, or even the government. The next item is that Israel is to be valued. We have got to stop allowing the anti-Semitic interlopers who seek to erase the history of the 1940s in Europe promote hatred of the Jewish people to students in our government-funded K-12 schools and government-subsidized colleges and universities. We need to help everyone in our nation understand that Israel is about the size of New Jersey, surrounded by neighbors larger than the population or the geography of China. Many of those people surrounding Israel believe that all Jewish people and Christians should be eliminated, exterminated. For those who are from other nations propagating this hate-fueled rhetoric within our shores, they need a one-way ticket back to their homeland, and I suggest they be forced to forfeit everything they can't fit in their suitcase. Then they have got to be added to a list of people never permitted future entry into America. So with the exception of this last thing I mentioned about deporting foreign anti-Semitic thugs with only their packed bag, these other things listed are a few of the items that President Trump formerly articulated so well, but has gone silent on. During his appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists conference in Chicago, it seemed as though Trump was portraying our values as radical. These are far from radical. Radical is what the left promotes. These values are foundational. And when you tamper with and remove a foundation, you jeopardize an entire structure, and in this case, the nation. Let's not forget what John Adams said. He said that our system of government would only work for a moral and religious people. I've said this so many times. But George Washington took that further, and he said that religion, which everyone understood in his day as Christianity, he said religion and morality are indispensable supports to our political prosperity. He continued with, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. Did you get that? George Washington questioned the patriotism of anyone who undermined the moral values found in Christianity. He said this was the very foundation on which the original founders had endeavored to create this new nation, and anyone who would seek to remove, undermine, or divorce America from the Judeo-Christian principles was not a true patriot. Many people would use the pejorative Christian nationalist to describe not only Washington, but every signer of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. So I don't expect President Trump will ever hear this. But if he did, I would say this to him. I'm going to vote for you. Because of the two choices before us, you're the best one for the job. America and the world was much better under your leadership than what we've had for the last 4 years. And while I know that a Kamala Harris presidency would take us further down this devastating path that Biden's handlers and the Democrat socialists have led us, your abandonment of this element of the base of your party is leaving the average conservative Christian evangelical unenthused to participate in the presidential election. I'm not justifying others' rationale or possible actions. I'm merely explaining this is the unfortunate reality that you helped create. You may potentially win the presidency without the support of the things that are important to us. But to what personal gain should you do it while compromising the truths of eternity and the values of our founders? Mr. Trump, I implore you to embrace and promote the values I mentioned, which you championed so well in prior elections. In so doing, you will excite the base of your party. Now, for those of you who are contemplating sitting out this election cycle because you feel abandoned by Trump's retreat on issues that we value, tell him. Tell his campaign and your elected representatives. Did you know that many legislators and politicians refused to stand up to Trump's campaign when they removed some of these important values from the party platform in a manner that violated party rules? Their contact information is right here on the left. I'm going to leave hyperlinks in the description accompanying this video. In addition to making your voice heard, I want you to ask yourself, what is the risk or cost to America if you don't vote? Unlike many on the left, we aren't seeking a political savior. Based on past performance, America and the world will benefit better from a Trump administration. Christians from America will more freely engage in the propagation of the Great Commission. The economy should improve quickly. And terrorists, while they may not like us any more than they do now, they will respect the consequences of going crossways with us. I ask you, don't stay home this November. Study the candidates up and down the ballot. Study the issues, every race from the party committee representative to the school board to the state and federal legislator to the White House. It all matters. We aren't voting based on the theology, the denomination, or the religion of the candidate at this point in time, but based on who will advance the best policies. And a track record speaks volume. Based on past performance, we have a clear choice between Trump and Harris. Remember, eventually, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Your God is the true God." And finally, he said, "Your God is my God." Are we going to see this with Trump? I don't know. But at least he listened to us in the past. And based on recent events, God may have his ear. Meanwhile, Jezebel substituted the true God with Baal and Asherah. And if you don't recall, Asherah was a goddess of sexual promiscuity, often celebrated through all kinds of sexual perversion and orgies. Baal was a god of child sacrifice. Think about this. This is where we are today. People recklessly engage in sex without commitment, and then they kill the children that are the natural result of it. This seems to be the rally cry of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the Democrat Party platform. Harris claims to attend a church, but if her pastor is affirming the things supported by Harris and the Democrats, which God calls sin, maybe they should stop calling that a church and begin identifying as a social club and support group. With a sober mind, I appeal to you based on what we've experienced in the last 4 years and the trajectory it will take us if we continue this path. What will we hand to succeeding generations? It's time we use some common sense in uncommon times. Well, as always, as I seek to encourage you in the work before you, let us remember the words from Galatians 6:9, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Have a great day.